need you. Maybe I'm amazed at the way you put me out of time. You hung me on the line. Maybe I'm amazed at the way I really need you. Maybe I'm a man, maybe I'm the only man who's in the middle of something that he doesn't really understand. Maybe I'm a man, maybe I'm the only man that will ever love you. Won't you help me to understand? I wanted to sing a song that I wouldn't get copywritten on because I'd like to promote this video, but such a beautiful song. Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. This channel exists to discuss the nature of reality, among other things. I've gone through this story 1,000 times, and there is still no resolution. On a fundamental level, there never will be. Right? But I'm living my life trying to be a loving, good person, hoping that they're not actually evil. That's all I can really hope for. I know that this condition that he's put upon us, and perhaps on some level, we both were looking for. I acknowledge that. Because it's exceedingly excellent if you understand. But the burdens of understanding come with them the temptation for evil. My name is Brian Jennings, known by many things, the Millennial Dragon, the Psychic Scientist. And if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification button, and let me know what you think. I removed my first comment this morning as a result of the charged political nature of it. That's not the type of conversation I'm interested in having. I want this channel to be like a bubble, where the world is filtered through it, but the ails of it cannot penetrate into it. We're talking about archetypes, ideals, philosophy, geometry, physics, the standard model, chemistry, all of the above. All under the guise of literature. We're talking about writing, as well as geometry. For surely the geometric archetype is the ultimate symbol. And if you recall, we're going through this book, Magnus Weininger's Spherical Models. And so, if you have a keen eye, perhaps you see the red that's right here. And here's another example. And so, I'm going to be putting it together. The rhombicosidodecahedron, 52 faces. Most complicated one yet. Once you just construct them properly, they really go together quite easily because it's always flat on flat. All you have to do is know which face goes where. So each of the square faces share 2 pentagonal faces. And in between them, an array of triangles. Another term for this is what's known as snub, right? A snub dodecahedron is a dodecahedron where all the faces are surrounded by triangles. Right, so this is kind of like a cousin of the snub forms. Each triangle in the form has a sibling. Their left hand, right hand. Never to be misconstrued for the other, otherwise the arc will not be proper. You could still put them together if you used all those triangles, but it would just look really ugly. Spent some time at the library today. If you recall, I'm doing 12th Night, Shakespeare, and my second rehearsal is tomorrow. As far as my relationship with such an austere auteur, it's my hope that we love each other enough to to just move on, right? I'd like to hope that it's just psychological torture. Only time will tell. In the beginning, there was darkness. And God said, "Let there be light." The people who wrote the Bible were very smart. It wasn't like a haphazard sort of writing. It was them analyzing the world and saying, okay, how did things come to be? And of course, one of the first things to come is light, must be, which is a pure refraction out of the awesome stillness that permeates all of space. Linseed oil. And so, as the eons passed, life continued to flourish. The supposition that I've placed on this channel is that space, as with the Kabbalah, is a series of emanations out of the pure abstraction, which is the totality of seemingly dead space. It's inert space, it's not dead space, which is corrupted through motion into kinetic action, which breeds forms, which breeds out of the abstract form the corpuscular shadow that we see and measure as matter. And so, in saying that, perhaps it becomes a little clearer why I've decided to make all of these forms. It's not because a triangle is pretty, though it is aesthetically satisfying. It's to fortify my psyche with the harmony of all of creation. That's why I do it. And this one is the most sophisticated one yet. I wrote down all of my lines for 12th night. That's my process. And so, I'll be going to rehearsal tomorrow, hopefully a little prepared, maybe perhaps even off book for the one scene that I'm in. But in any event, psychic phenomenon must by necessity be real if life is an emanation out of a divine abstraction. Because if we have an origin, if it's not a chaotic, haphazardness of motion, right? If something moved space and compelled it to become matter, then therefore the spiritual and mystery traditions of all time all have intellectual validity. And at the highest end of that, of course, must be man. Everything else before man is a slave to the condition of its body, which Manly Palmer Hall espouses on in no small amount regarding the orientation of the spinal column of all mammals until man. All mammals up until man have a horizontal spinal column which compels their gaze downward. It's only until man, who had the audacity to betray the design of his backbone to stand upright and have these two things called hands, that we step into the territory of divinity. And so, man, once he understood his hands, once he was making cave pictures with his hands, right, with berries, right, he began creating. And so, at the highest levels of the first layer of creation is man, a mineral, vegetable, animal man. And the highest levels of that, above that, the secondary, is the artist And the tertiary, and the highest, is the medium. Right? If we say that all of life expresses itself through a noble abstract divinity, then we must also recognize that space itself is fundamentally structured in a twofold manifold. The first of which is the subspatial, subquantum, submolecular structuring, which exists as a quantum hologram of probability. And we can only understand it, I understand it, as an infinite complex nesting of polyhedra. All of these forms are on the board are examples of it. This form will be another example of it once I'm done putting it together. And the other half of the coin, there's two coins, right? These are the first two emanations after Kether. Is the impetus for motion, it's an exertion of pressure upon the subspatial structuring. And so, if you exert a pressure, right, and collapse the quantum hologram in a particular direction, a dihedral, the specific angle or angel with which the force is exerted upon the quantum hologram reflects what we measure and interpret as manifested matter. Infinitely complex. Once it's set into motion, it is a kinetic corruption. And what we see is a shadow of its idealized form, Plato's allegory of the cave. I've said it many times, right? That the unphilosophic life is lived as though chained to a cave. And the things that you see are shadows cast upon the wall of the cave from a source of illumination behind you cannot see. And when the good student, the adept, breaks free of the cave, liberates his mind and his body from the shackles of oppression, which is his ignorance, and he goes outside to see the real world. When he goes back into the cave to save his brethren from their dull mediocrity, their non-existence, he says, oh no, I'll help you out. You have to come with me. This isn't the way. This isn't the truth. This isn't the life. Right? And so, in those moments, all of his friends say, oh, how unfortunate, he's lost his mind. And wisdom appears as madness to the uninitiated. So, if the medium is operating at the highest levels of potential for man as a creator, as a divine extension of the Almighty, right? Then it must reason that by understanding these forms, right, which express a piece of that absolute complex nesting of polyhedra, all within all, Johannes Kepler, right? The harmony of the sphere's corpus homundi, I think it's called. Then by meditating on these forms, you become more tapped into the quantum hologram, and therefore become a more powerful medium, or a wiser, more well-rounded medium. I'm often using the term magic. I'm often using the term sorcery. And often, I would guess when people watch these, they say, oh, it's like, what is it, like, magic's for babies, Penn and Teller's for babies, right? And so what I'm saying, right, just to kind of like buff the varnish off it completely, is that the things that people refer to as clairvoyant, telepathy, telekinesis, remote viewing, they're all the same things that people refer to as magic in centuries past. Magic is sorcery. It's not a similar thing, it's the same thing. And so what am I talking about? I'm talking about, in a big way, the brain, the actual physical organ of the brain. And what I mean, and this is all in my novel, in the prologue on magic, right, is that the brain is wired in a particular way. The cells inside of your brain have an electrical field that they generate through our actions, through our contemplations, etc., etc., etc. Right? That everything that we do, right, is in relation to our neural activity. And so instances of remote viewing are the same thing as instances of magic because the same thing is occurring neurologically in your brain. That you're creating what I dub a thought force, right? Thought is a force, and philosophy should be an energy, right? That you're engendering this condition, which is a novel neuronal firing, right? And then using that to push the horizon of your awareness out to a disparate locale. And at the highest levels of that, the adept, right, the student, is behaving like God. Right? Where God fractures and mutates the hologram according to its will per the dihedral angle that motion is imposed upon it. Right? And though man can never understand the full totality of the formula, right, instances of clairvoyance, instances of magic and witchcraft and all these things are all hearkening to the same idea, that they're using their mind, right, to exert a psychic pressure upon a disparate locale on the firmament to mutate it and transmute it into the desired quality, the desired substance. Right? Nothing else has ever been occurring. So Walter Russell teaches us that the varying pressure conditions which constitute the creator's thinking, which is not a creature, it's important, I have to make this distinction every time, right? It's not a creature in creation, right? That it's gravitation and its radiations, it's concentration and decentration, right? That the God that he's talking about is stillness. That's what it is. That the still condition of space holds within it that infinitely complex quantum hologram, right? And this is pre-Rubin Bohm, right? The holographic model. That within every cubic centimeter of space, in terms of information, lies the potential for all of manifested creation, right? And so this is what he's talking about when he discusses nuns, holy people, right? So the first layer is characters like Shakespeare, right? Characters like Quentin Tarantino, right? Writers, right? Artists, painters, Leonardo da Vinci, right? Where it's a sincere expression of desire, of intent, of will to see the hologram, which is creation, made manifestly more beautiful by your action. Right? And so on the second level of that is characters like Sir Walter Raleigh, and I've talked about him before. Sir Walter Raleigh was one of the first of what we would call modern chemists. He was in the Tower of London like 20 years. And there's documents of the executioner complaining about how he turned his only garden into a still, to like a distillery, right? And so he had this tonic, it's called the Grand Cordial. And so this guy, he hears about this guy. They say, oh, he's gotten kicked by a horse, he's got gangrene really bad, there's no way he's going to die. And he gave him a massive dose of this Grand Cordial, and it broke that gangrene, and he kept living, right? So he's using his mind, right, not to express its imagination necessarily, though it is, but to manipulate the world, to manipulate matter, right? To fracture the hologram according to his will, right? And on the highest levels of that is the medium, the artistic medium. Where, take Joe McMoneagle for instance. Right? In all of his successful remote viewings, right? Sometimes he had a picture, sometimes he had nothing, and his success rate was so high that he became a living legend. He's still a living legend. Right? And so these are the highest levels, right? Where you're using your mind, your understanding that all of space is a conscious field, of which all of matter only represents a very small portion. And so through meditation, right, through mastery of the mind, right, you can behave like that abstract intellectual divinity and put your conscious awareness anywhere you want. And so, right, there's noble and then there's ignoble. Right? And I suppose that's all I'm going to say about that. But there's things that you can be doing that are perfectly reasonable, perfectly lawful. So, This is how it works. That's what's occurring. I've never been keen on it in terms of remote viewing. It interested me. It's always interested me, but I always thought, I'm an intellectual creature. I guess I always saw it as some sort of violation. And I know that's not true on some level. As long as you're not bothering anyone, what is it? It doesn't hurt anything. But now, I've been initiated. I didn't have a choice in the matter. And I suppose on a big level, I wasn't, or I initiated myself, but now, I suspect that he sees me every time he tries to remote view anyone. And of course, I don't even have to try. So what's the answer? What is the solution? I don't rightly know. All I can do is just keep praying. Keep being a good man in the world. I know what I'm good at. Is there a hope for Quentin and myself to reconcile? I don't think so. It's gotten so out of hand, I can't in good conscience trust anything that I hear now. But if we could even if we just exist in this way. So, see what's good in your life. I suppose I'll stop. It'll be done with the next video. Know that life is not an accident. All of life emerges out of some noble divinity. And the closer that you are to the source, the wider the horizon of your ignorance is, because you're closer to the edge. God bless. Like, comment, subscribe, share.